Hello and welcome. It is Sunday, February 2nd, 2025, and I'm here with Peter Copping. And I'm really pleased today to be bringing you this discussion. Peter is a longtime friend and also meditator and yogi or yoga practitioner, and is very interested in all things spiritual, esoteric, and is a specialist in particular in sacred geometry. You can see he has some moving and dancing around in the background for us as well. And so part of the discussions that I've had with Peter over very many years, they've always been in group settings or just, hanging out sort of things. And so many times I thought other people need to hear what Peter's talking about, because this wealth of knowledge is there, not just knowledge, but experience as well, bringing in being in conversation with sacred geometry in a really special way so that he allows forms or builds things as inspired. And so even the star behind him, we will hear about this. That is something that is part of his conversation with the universe, with existence, with sacred geometry, whatever it is. But it's through inspiration to bring things through from idea into the 3D world. And I've benefited greatly from sitting in meditation in relation to Peter's forms, also having a few of them myself that I've lived with in my space. And I'm really pleased for you to hear more about Peter's journey. And there is a Shivambu link because I was talking about Shivambu and Peter became interested and jumped on board with that. So welcome, Peter.
Thanks, Megan. That was a great introduction. It shows the value of really knowing somebody. The words you use, the insight you had, I really appreciate that. Very accurate.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm very glad. We were chatting briefly before we started recording. And we were trying to figure out when we had originally met, but it was at a meeting for an artist cooperative. And apparently afterwards, I rember standing outside because it was a warm evening and like in the darkness and talking about Shivambu. But that was about 2018. And
Yeah.
what happened from there?
Well, what I remember, so clearly about that, there were five people in the room and they were getting ready to have a business meeting. And I was just like fascinated by your determination to speak about Shivambu in a social context that had nothing to do with it. And the other people weren't exactly horrified, but it was like they knew you a lot better than I did because I just met you. And on their faces was, oh my God, she's not going to do this again, is she? And I read that and I thought, oh, now I'm really interested. So I was quite riveted. And I think you held forth for like 10 minutes. And and I thought, okay, that's it. I've got to try this. And every morning I had about two mouthfuls of my fresh urine from that moment, like the next day.
Mm.
And um and then 3 years later, I guess it was late 2021, I felt like the world was being like, turned upside down and I needed some stronger medicine to help me cope physically, psychologically, um, maybe spiritually. And I thought, I have got to double my commitment to the UT, to the Shivambu. And I went all in. I started making ridiculous quantities of aged, which became a problem for me when I went to travel. And thank you, Joe. And yeah, so I've been really full on with it for 3 years and 3 months.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah. And
and
in
a
that,
lot of benefit.
yeah,
A lot of
in
benefit.
that period, one of the things Peter had hosted a meditation space in starting in 2020, and that was one of the places then because we were meditating. It was specifically in his space where there was sacred geometry, and whatever form you had just brought through would be usually the focus of the meditation. Sometimes more than one form would be in the center of the meditation space, as well as just having other forms around all the time. And as I'm wont to do in a space with other people who are spiritually inclined, one of the things that I would share about on a weekly basis would be Shivambu. So to go from 2018, you're saying 2021, you sort of doubled down on it. And I was also speaking about it a lot in 2020 and 2021 in these
Hmm.
spaces. So And doubling down as well. I mean, for people who are listening, like they're going, well, yeah, but what does that mean? So like you can take a couple sips of Shivambu on a daily basis, but when you add in other protocols, you're saturating more of the body with this liquid. And so it could involve, Peter did all sorts of things, but for anyone who's listening, it could involve doing body rubs, doing enemas, and then doing it in more than like in multiple places. So people will then put it on their hair and let it sit there. They will take more time with it, almost like more meditative practice with it, in the eyes, in the nose. Some people put it in their ears. Everybody has their own reaction to all of these things. And so I'm not advocating to say do everything all at once. Sometimes it's good to try one thing at a time so that if there is something that happens, if there's a response from the body, you know which thing or which area of the body was really involved in that response. So, for example, if somebody puts it in, I guess what I want to say is like the eyes, ears, and nose are all connected and they're very potent. And some people put it in their eyes and then they get red eyes or itchy eyes, or some pus will even come out. Some people put it in their ears and then they can get old, remembrance, so to speak, of old ear infections, or sinus infections could come up. And ears really hurt. Like if they're upset, they really hurt. So it's not that it's a good thing to get to know which parts of the body want to shed old things. And it can be really intense. And so this area in particular, I'm just sort of, as I flippantly say, you can put in your eyes, your ears, your nose. It can also elicit a lot of information at the beginning when someone's starting. So I'll add that in there as well. But this is what we mean by doubling down. So people could do foot soaks, foot massages, full body massages in the belly button, enemas, bastis, which are small implants of like a teaspoon to a tablespoon. There's just so many ways to work with it. And that's part of, Peter picked various protocols and did a lot of them. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, the biggest one was just making the aged and consuming the aged.
Mm.
Like in a bunch of the things you mentioned, not all of them, but the volume of fresh went way up, like to, I sort of generally say between a half a liter and a liter a day of fresh, and at least 20, probably more like 40 milliliters of aged a day, always in the nose and always swishing the mouth. And that's kind of my morning routine. And the longer I do it, the more it's really interesting, Megan. The longer I do it, the more aware I am of the impact of it. Like, it became really clear to me that drinking some fresh would boost the energy in my system. And if I thought of it as a morning practice, then my energy would trail off. But if, I come in at a certain time in the afternoon and knock back some fresh, then my energy level goes up in a very useful way, right? And I mean, I was always kind of vaguely aware of that, but my awareness of it keeps getting keener, with experience. And I think with the purification that comes, I don't know, when I listen to you talk, it's humbling because I realize how much more you know about everything, having done it so much longer and studied it so much harder. And really, I'm a complete amateur, but I'm a keener.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've found interesting being in conversation with you as you've done this is that you have a lifetime meditation practice and you have the sacred geometry as deep practices where you're incredibly knowledgeable. And so it feels like often when someone has a practice that is very expansive and lifts frequency and brings more energy in naturally, which meditation and sacred geometry do, that there is often a deeper subtlety of awareness when another practice can meet those practices.
I'm so glad you said that, because one of the things in the back of my mind that I had to spit out in this discussion for the benefit of the people who are following you is the idea of hybridization. And it seems like in all these different fields in the last 10, 20, 30 years, people are realizing that the best response to a problem or to meet some kind of objective or raise the level of a whole situation is to come at it from multiple angles. And, the way we've been educated is to define the problem one way and solve it one way. And that's actually not usually the best way.
Mm.
And so, yeah, coming at the whole, say, challenge of human consciousness and human health and well-being from multiple angles is just way more effective. And I love that you're so open to that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in my own life, I mentioned this a lot, but the two practices that came to me in the same 2 week period were Shivambu and the Dalian method, the self-healing Dalian method. And I
Mm.
don't know who I am. I don't know who I would be without those two now. And I can't fully pull them apart because they came
Yeah.
in at the same time and they have had such an impact together. They do different things, but I can't pull them apart. And I see them as both intrinsic to my development as a person and how much I like my life now. That
Mm.
that
Well,
that they together have done that. So this is what, those happen to be my two. And in your case, you then brought this third one in. And when we come, as you say, when we come at something from multiple angles, like often I'm working with Shivambu and something starts, I'm aware of something in my energy. I'm aware of something surfacing. And if it doesn't shift, if I can't go deeper with the Shivambu, like just sort of doing my normal thing, because often it will just come up, I'll see it, it'll resolve itself, and off it goes. But if it doesn't do that, then I go, oh, now it's time for the Dalian. Now I have to bring this in because they inform each other. And I've started to learn what sort of things work. And so you're talking about sort of, what I hear is sort of the same thing. It's like having that hybridization, having that ability to say, this is the thing that needs to be brought in now, and then I'll know when the other thing then has to come back in or take a different role in what I'm doing. So
mm.
to give people context about sacred geometry in particular, I would love to
Yep.
jump into some of the slides that you prepared. So I'm going to
Sure.
share my screen, and we will see what we have. You can tell me when you can see it.
Yep.
Okay. So talk me through what are we looking at today?
Well, this is just a warm-up image. These are the five perfectly symmetrical three-dimensional shapes. So a three-dimensional enclosed form is called a polyhedron, and five of them are perfectly regular, meaning that all sides, faces, and angles are equal. And rightly or wrongly, the discovery of these forms is credited to Plato, and so they're known as the Platonic solids. And that's kind of foundational to sacred geometry. And we don't need to discuss that. This is not a sacred geometry seminar, and so you can move on. The Merkaba is a dual compound of the tetrahedron. So the tetrahedron is the simplest Platonic solid. It's a three-dimensional triangle. And when you get one of those pointing up, intersecting with one pointing down, you get a form that is some geometers call a dual compound tetrahedron, but the esoteric community calls them Merkaba, which is generally seen in the esoteric community as a three-dimensional representation of the light body. And the light body is the original body and your sort of cosmic vehicle, your chariot, that can take you through different incarnations, different dimensions, the seat of the soul, that kind of thing. And so, again, we don't need to dwell on this, but when sacred geometry comes up, uh, Merkabas come up really quickly.
Mm.
And it's very difficult to describe what a Merkaba looks like. So this is just my public service gambit.
I like it.
You can
So
move on. Ready?
I'm just going to go back one. So this is the tetrahedron,
Yeah.
the red.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's one of these facing up and one of these facing down.
Yeah.
And then this is what it looks like. And this is in metal, so we can see through it. So it's not that it's a solid one, but a lot of, again, stores that sell crystals or things like that often have a crystal Merkaba in rose quartz or a crystal
Yep.
Merkaba in
Yes.
something else. So this, you would see it and it would be solid and you wouldn't be able to look through it like this, but
That's
that's
true.
the form that we're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah.
And before we move on from this slide, I should also say that if you join the outer points of the Merkaba, you get a cube, which is another Platonic solid. And if you join the points of intersection on the inside, you get an octahedron. And the cube and the octahedron are called reciprocals. They're intimately related. And so the dual compound of the tetrahedron actually generates two more of the Platonic solids. It generates, yeah, those two,
The
the yellow one,
green.
the green
Yeah.
and the yellow.
Yeah.
And this is sort of the advanced version, if you compound the tetrahedron 5 times, it generates the two more complex ones on the right.
Wow.
The icosahedron is the blue one, the purple one is the dodecahedron. And to my sensing, the blue and the purple ones are cosmic in import, and the purple one is more about the spirit, and the blue one is more about the universal structure, the manifest form. So you have the unmanifest aspect in purple and the more manifested aspect in blue, and then the yellow and the green. Similarly, they're also a pair of reciprocals, and it's maybe a little harder for me to articulate, but the cube is um, about boundaries and what is inside and what is outside. And the octahedron is more about what flows through everything. And
Mm.
so those are, you could talk about those as contradictory principles, but really, um, they're complementary. And that's part of the migration of consciousness that we have to make, is that we've fallen into all this insane polarity because we're opposing things that are meant to be complementary.
Well,
So, yeah, go
and I'm
ahead.
just wondering, you found this image and someone else picked these colors, or these are colors that are often associated with them?
That's a good question. I think, yeah, I mean, the tetrahedron is often associated with fire, and so on, but I wouldn't put too much on the colors here, and that's not something I paid a lot of attention to
I was going to say, because
myself.
the way you just described them,
Yeah,
the tetrahedron is associated with fire and it's red, and that's the root chakra.
yeah,
The octahedron's about flow. That's well, it's more the third chakra, which is yellow, but that idea of like the next stage up being about flow. And of course, the second chakra, third chakra are both well, the second one is about flow. It's about water. The water element's the second chakra. But it was just sort of, I was thinking, okay, about flowing. The third one, you said, it's about what's inside and what's outside, and where do we have boundaries, and it happens to be green, and that's the heart chakra. And that's one of the biggest problems humans have, is where are my emotional boundaries? Who am I inside my heart? How am I able to expand with that without getting enmeshed with you? And then the blue one being about manifest in the reality, and that's the throat, in terms of being able to speak things into the world and have them be made manifest. And then the purple going to the crown chakra and that spiritual realm, which is more of that connection, bringing us back and forth. So everything you said
yeah,
lines up with the chakras, and that's why I asked about the colors, because they were
yeah.
pretty close.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
good. That's really good. A really good example of like multidimensional thinking, which is something I wanted to drag into this conversation. That I think UT does this, and I think sacred geometry does this. The whole cognitive process becomes more holistic and multidimensional, and
Yeah.
you start thinking multidimensionally, and you come up with new kinds of answers much more easily. And what you just said is a great example of that. I hadn't even thought about that stuff,
Yeah.
and it just sort of like flows out of you. So yeah,
And we just, so that to signpost this as well, we may or may not get here today, and this is a discussion that I'd like to bring in Fiona Gardner at some point as well.
yeah,
But part of, because you and I have been talking about urine and sacred geometry for years, Fiona
yeah,
is showing the images of urine and sacred geometry in real time. And
yeah,
so that discussion, to see somebody bring in exactly what we've been talking about, is so energizing and so affirming. And one of the things that she says, and that I think this word is part of what you're talking about, is this coherence. That working with Shivambu brings in coherence, working with sacred geometry brings in coherence. And when we see that Shivambu itself is amplifying our own coherence within our system, then it makes sense that the sacred geometry in Shivambu is part of how coherence is formed, and that when we start being in relationship with this liquid, our coherence increases. And this is part of what people end up saying, is like they start to work with their Shivambu in any way. Drinking is the one where I hear the most of it, but they don't have to be doing that. But they work with it in any way, and they start saying they feel more connected, more aligned, more intelligent, more in flow, quicker. more able to see things. And this is part of this coherence of and how information then flows with a more coherent system.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right. So you have more. So there was the Merkaba, and the next image you have is a much bigger form.
Yeah, that was my first structure, and that was designed for me by people who taught me how to do this work, and they designed this and built it. This is a replica I made for a friend, but that was my introduction. And I slept in this form, and people asked me what it was like, and in the first months I would say, I feel like I'm sleeping in the stars because
Mm,
that was actually a very cosmic, built around the octahedron, an octagon at the base, two-dimensional eight-sided thing at the base, and then it morphs up through these golden ratio triangles into the full octahedron, right? That I think it was the yellow form we saw. And then a smaller one suspended in that was wired up with precious metals and crystals. Anyway, the point I wanted to make about sleeping among the stars was when we're asleep, we're always sleeping among the stars. And whatever veil was covering my perception of that while I was sleeping was removed while I was sleeping in this form. And I was aware of the stars. I was
mm,
floating in the stars, and we all are, right? So it's not about becoming, it's that paradox, right? That nothing is different and everything is different because consciousness is different. So in one case, you're sleeping in the stars and you don't know it. And in the other case, you're sleeping in the stars and you know it. And in one sense, nothing has changed. And in another sense, everything has changed.
yeah.
And that's the human journey right now, which is so exciting. I
You
wonder
just,
if, yeah, go ahead.
but you wonder.
Oh, well, I was wondering if we should show that cymatics video soon.
Oh, okay. The other thing I wanted to bring up, just because you mentioned it just now, as we
Mm,
keep looking at forms, anytime like the Merkaba was small, thin pieces of metal that were joined. This is
yeah.
tubing.
Yeah, this is copper pipe,
Yeah.
three-quarter inch. It's the stuff that, a plumber would use.
Yeah. But so that
Yeah,
people understand the difference between the types of forms we're showing, and that something
yeah,
like this, the energy gets amplified because there is space in the piping in the tube, and that
yeah,
at the
yeah.
ends, then you're talking, you mentioned crystals and the kind of wiring, and that those joints have are part of the amplification
Oh yeah.
going
Oh
on.
yeah. I migrated from the closed tubes. Most people who are building geometric forms crimp the tubes or otherwise close them at the ends and join them with hardware. And I've found different ways to leave the tubes open and the connection points open, and there's much more energy flow. So you get the same kind of energy, but you get much more amplitude with this kind of approach, the open tube approach for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And okay, so the cymatics video, part of I'm going to stop the share for a second. There was a video that Peter had sent me, and I'm going to bring it up here.
And we can talk over it. We didn't I don't know if that'll work or not, but
Right.
there's no soundtrack on this video. There is a soundtrack, but there's no talking, and there's no need to hear the video to understand what's happening. So
Okay.
we can talk about it while it's happening
Okay.
if you don't do that.
Yep. No, um I'm just gonna share that, I guess. Okay. So I just want to bring up this. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna
Yeah, it's working.
mute. Yep. I'm just gonna mute. How do I do?
I'm not hearing any sound.
No, no, no. I stopped it for a second. Um,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to play with my. There we go. So we're gonna watch it without the sound because you mentioned that wasn't the necessary part. But do you
Yeah,
want to?
it gives us the freedom to talk about what's happening on the
Yeah. So
screen.
please, yeah, please do.
Okay, so cymatics is this, I don't know if you would call it a science or a technique, but they take a plate and they put fine grains of sand or salt on the plate and then direct sound frequencies like 100 hertz. And then you'll see what happens as sound is transmitted onto the plate. So it says vibrate the metal plate by using a tone generator. As the pitch of the tone increases, geometric patterns will form and become more complex. So this is 345 hertz. So this is just what the salt does when you beam that sound frequency at it. And this is 1033 hertz. Hertz is cycles per second. So it's a rate of vibration. And that describes different sound pitches. This is 1820. So you can see the complexity is increasing with the frequency, not just the complexity, the coherence, right?
Yeah.
Coherence and the the geometries are all coherent. The coherence is maintained and the complexity goes up. But adding in my own experience here on top of this video, as the complexity of coherent structure increases, so does its capacity to hold energy.
There it
And
is.
this is very important for us. This has huge implications for where we're going with our physiology, where we're going with our health, and where we're going with our consciousness. Because as probably most of the people who are watching this video know, the frequency on the planet is going up. And although it doesn't always seem like it, people's frequency is going up. And UT is part of this big, Shivambu is part of this big migration to another frequency zone.
Mm.
And so these images for me are emblematic of something much bigger than a black plate with some salt and some sound going on it. It's like a metaphor, but it's actually physics, and it demonstrates the physics of it.
And as we keep going with other images today and the discussion, part of that piece that you mentioned, and this is what we see in Fiona Gardner's work, the higher the frequency, the coherence is maintained with more energy.
Yeah.
And the energy, when we say energy, is like it's the ability to impart energy is also part of it when we talk about the Shivambu, that when we are drinking the Shivambu, we are receiving light or energy in the form of, I mean, you can call it negative ions. You can put different words on it from science, but that idea of, you say, like, if you drink a glass of Shivambu later in the day, you feel energized.
Yep.
And that's part of what we're talking about. So that
Yep.
the idea behind showing the video in particular was to bring in this, and now can you see the slides again?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Was to bring in this explanation of saying, what does it look like when the frequency goes up, the geometry gets more complex, the coherence is maintained, like just as an example of how this is all functioning. Okay. So the next.
Yep. Yeah, I'm not sure. This might be not the right time for this one.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the next form. With the people who taught me how to do this, I co-designed this with them, and he built it for me. And this has the closed tube, so it doesn't have the open tubes, but the connections are open. And this was called the azimuth, and it was very cosmic. And I had it up for 5.5 years in Toronto. And then I moved within the city, and then I built this, and it's essentially a walk-in crystal. It has crystalline geometry, like if you buy a big piece of quartz crystal, like a tower with the six-sided apex. I wasn't actually aiming for that, but that's what it turned out. So these were fairly large scale devices that filled rooms and that groups could go into. And at different times, I would sleep in them, and I would usually meditate in them. And so my experience of sacred geometry is not primarily intellectual, it's really visceral. So the vibrational signature of each device was essentially being metabolized by me. And another thing that's worth saying is that a lot of these devices are transceivers, like the previous one and this one. A transceiver is something that transmits and receives. And the lights came on for me watching your Fiona Gardner's work, that the images that she's showing look a lot like transceivers, which means that the the human body is capable of receiving different kinds of energy and intelligent energy that is essentially informative and also capable of sending out energy that is higher in volume of energy, higher in frequency, and higher in information. So, for example, that could be a pathway of explaining why we're becoming more telepathic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And part of this then is I mean, your experience over what, 40 years of working with sacred geometry?
Uh, 23,
Okay.
22?
Okay. 22 years.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
has also been that you notice uh, the interaction not only of yourself with the form and the form with you, but that the way the form comes in, the form itself wants to be made manifest in the material world, and it will push on a human who is able to interpret that information to get that human to bring it in. And
Yeah.
in the sense
That's
of,
been
if you're open to doing it, then you start getting the instruction and the like, please create me.
right. And it doesn't seem that there are very many of us. Like I'm aware of a few other people that do this work around the world. Like in this particular way, there are other people I think who are doing it through art and other modalities, but in this particular way, there's just a handful of us. But there's many people who are attracted to it who know how to use it. And I've met people who I feel can use it in a much more kind of proficient, dramatic way than I can. And so, it's like an ecosystem, right? Where I'm capable of bringing in forms, but somebody can walk into a form and just like almost like drive it like a rocket ship, and like they go out of the solar system with it, right? I've seen stuff that's like, wow, how can you even do that? And they have no idea how I built it, right?
Mm. But they know how to
And
use it.
they know how to use it. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I don't know
so,
if that's
yeah, no,
digression or not.
I wanted to bring that
Interesting.
in.
Fun fact. Yeah.
One of the things that it was my experience was in meditating with the forms. It wasn't just now we're going to sit and meditate with the form. We also found, because we did this like every week for like 3 years, that if it's a full moon, if it's a new moon, if there's a planetary alignment, if there's the Schumann resonance is particularly high, if there is a disturbance in humanity because a war just broke out or there's a dispute about something, we felt the shifts in our own meditation while with the form to be
Mhm.
very impacted by the cosmic experiences that were going on.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's all about, actually, I think that Shivambu and sacred geometry are all about restoring our connection to the cosmos and to discovering that God is not only outside of ourselves, but God is inside of ourselves.
Mm.
And once that starts to happen for you, then the cosmic connection is there. Yeah.
Yeah. This next one I don't think I've seen this one in person.
No, no. And you can just sort of, scroll through these.
Okay. So this one is one I've lived with. When you were
Yeah.
having this is different because you call it a tablet. It's
Yeah.
three-dimensional, but it exists mostly in like two planes. And it can hang from the ceiling, from a window, from in a place like the star. So there's a tablet. This is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 1/8 inch brass or stainless steel or copper, and they're cut on machine tools that are controlled by computers, called laser jet or water jet. And so I was getting frustrated because my big forms were just too big and expensive for people, and I thought I've got to figure out how to miniaturize this technology, and so far I have 4 of these tablet designs. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're at the moment, because over many years you've moved around, but you have a friend now who's actually able to make these to order. That's why
Yeah.
you said they have 4, because there are 4 that are actually available.
Yeah. My friend, Kat McKernan in Alberta, is working with a Hutterite colony that has a laser jet, and they're doing just exquisite work. And she can produce these on demand and sell them to people and ship them to people.
Yeah, and all that
Um,
information will be linked in the video in the notes. So if you're
okay.
interested in learning more about Peter's the forms that are available at the moment, you can look at those, because this, for example, is a much bigger form, and this is not the sort of thing that is available to order.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
so some of the forms we've seen so far, like multiple people can sit in them at once, whereas this one is clearly for one person at a time.
yeah. Yeah.
And then
A funny thing about this is that I spent almost as much time trying to figure out that stool. So the form revolves around the base of the stool. And so you could sit on this modified bar stool or whatever it is and spin the whole form around you.
mm,
And the height was adjustable on the stool. So the idea was to get the heart center in the center of the sphere. And what I always felt when I sat in that was that I was at the center of the world, the center of the earth. But the thing is that this is the circular form of the synthesis of the icosahedron and the dodecahedron. So you have the pentagons of the dodeca and the triangles of the icosa, and they're all harmonized. And that is a description of the kind of like the meridians of the earth, the energetic, the
mm,
etheric of the earth. And yeah, so it's just a very powerful technology that people just aren't very aware of anymore. There have been whole civilizations based on this, right?
yeah.
But we forgot about that. But still there, still works.
Well, and one of the things, as we go to the next form, this is a form that you brought in while I was meditating with you in the group, and so we all experienced you bringing this in. And
Yeah,
this is then the form that we probably meditated with the most.
yep,
And it is less than a foot in diameter, or in length in each direction. So it's smaller than, like, each side is not as long as a foot. I don't know if you know the exact dimension, but just to
yeah.
give people.
I, yeah, about 8 inches on the outside, and then the whole thing would be about 10 inches cubed,
Okay.
the whole
Yeah.
third dimension. Yeah.
Yeah. Because, like, it's big, but it's a little bigger than my head, sort of, or
Yeah.
sort
Oh,
of.
yeah.
It's not,
Heavy.
this isn't massive, and it's also not teeny.
Right.
It's a good size. And you can
Good size.
see here what Peter was talking about. These are, like, the tubes are open, and the joint work allows the energy that would be flowing through each tube to intersect each other at those joins. And this one, you can't see it, but Peter often had a crystal hanging in the middle
Yeah.
of this as well. And this was Joy Dragon
Yeah.
was the name of this one. And one of the things, like, I remember the first or second time I meditated with Joy Dragon, I felt like the next day, I think, like I had a hangover. Like, there
Hmm.
was, I think, like, once, it only happened once, but it was kind of that, it was a line. I had to come into frequency with it. And I felt that energetically, like there was a pull on my system. And so I was a little tired the next
Yeah.
day, but that
Yeah.
only happened one time, because then I was aligned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Often on first use of a form, someone will come in and they'll say, "Wow, my elbow is really hurting." And for 5 minutes, their elbow will really hurt, and then they'll be fine. And what's happening is that the energy is rushing against a blockage and hitting the blockage. And it's almost kind of like a roto-rooter or something that blasts through the blockage and opens up the system.
Well,
And
and there's something right now
that
called,
can happen.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a methodology being used right now called PMF, and it's taking the Earth's vibrational frequency and running it through, like, a tube someone can, or like it's all grounded, but you can, sometimes it's like a tube that you can put around a shoulder or over a head or on the body. And
Hmm.
that is the same idea with it. They run this in, and you can tell when it hits a blockage. And over many treatments, that blockage will start to soften and eventually dissolve. But this is interesting. It's basically doing the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Sounds like it.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is another one that this was much larger and was hung from the ceiling in your apartment.
Yeah. I could only handle it for about 3 weeks. I built three forms that in these 22 years or whatever it is that were just completely overpowering, essentially unlivable. And this one went right out into the woods. When I realized I just, it was kind of like breaking up with a new girlfriend. It's like, I can't live with you anymore. You've got to go out. You got to leave.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
too
it's
much.
hanging in the woods now. Yeah.
Yeah. But this is the other interesting thing about these forms, is that even when you say, okay, I brought it in. It was incredibly powerful. It had to go be in nature. It's happy in nature. The
Yeah.
frequency it's emitting, the thing that it allows to flow, because each one allows energy to flow in a unique way, that energy needs to flow in that way. So existence brings it in, and it doesn't matter where it is, it's doing its work.
Yeah. For me, the tricky part has been my personal life.
Mm,
Like what I have to, and I've given over a lot of my energy, a lot of my space, a lot of my money to this, and no regrets and no complaints. But it's intense work, and you're right. I guess the bottom line is that I just have to manage personally with all these factors, um, because the reality is this kind of energy just has to be here.
yeah.
One way or another, it'll find a way.
Well, and then we go
And
back. I'll take that back to whether you're doing meditation, whatever spiritual practices someone does. Now, this involved, money and outlay because you had to actually buy stuff to build a thing.
yeah.
But anybody who's going to get involved with, I mean, even with Shivambu, it can become at various points very time consuming.
Mm.
And then it becomes less time consuming depending on what you're doing and where you are with it. But the energy must flow. And my experience is if I don't do it, eventually I get schooled. It's like, no, we've been telling you for 3 weeks, you have to go do this thing now. You have to do this practice. You have to engage deeper. And if I don't do it, then I hit a wall of some kind and go, oh, okay, right. I haven't been doing the thing you asked me to do. And
Yeah.
so we all start, I mean, again, we all start doing the thing we've been asked to do. And so here's the star, which you have hanging behind you. And I have one just out of reach of my arm, but I have one here in the room I'm in as well.
Hmm.
And this is the most recent piece of geometry. And we found it to be incredibly potent with Shivambu. But if you could talk to it first, like what is it?
Okay. Well, it's a pentagram. And the thing about the pentagon, which is a regular pentagon is a two-dimensional, five-sided shape that everybody knows. And if you extend the sides of the pentagon, you get these triangles, these five triangles. And this is, you could call it a golden ratio star. And then it turns out that you can articulate it internally, such that it's like essentially this is a fractal pentagram. And so in each triangle, there are fully five um, pentagrams of descending size. So there are 27 pentagrams in this form altogether. The big outer one, the small central one inside the big pentagon,
Yeah.
and then five little
Yeah.
ones in each triangle. So that's 5 times 5 is 25, plus the big outer one and the big inner one, and that's 27, which is 3 cubed. And believe it or not, all this stuff makes a difference. And so it's I used to say that the key principles in this work that I'm doing, that the the big common denominators seem to be the golden ratio and fractal organization. I meant to look up the definition of fractal, but I didn't do it. But it's
Right.
this idea that the thing keeps articulating itself off itself at different smaller levels of scale.
Yeah. So the big, in this case, these are the idea of the fractal here. So this is 1, 2, 3,
Yeah,
4, 5. There,
yeah,
the last
yeah,
one is really tiny, but it's very, very present there.
yeah.
And so what happened, interestingly, so if we go back, I'm just going to show the difference. This is biogenesis. This is similar to a flower of life, but it's slightly different in its
Seed
rate.
of life. It's a kind of iteration of the seed of life. Yeah.
Yeah. And it has little stars. The way that everything comes together here at these joins, there's like a little star that also
Mm.
comes in, but it's not five-sided. I think that one's six, um, maybe.
You know what I love about this form is that it looks like there's all this crazy design work, but it's actually just what happens when you line up the circles
Yeah.
correctly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's so beautiful. This is just in general, it's soft, it's inviting, it's
Yeah.
easy to look at, it's easy to sit with. When I first bought one and brought it into my space, I noticed a shift in the energy, and I couldn't have it. I think I couldn't just hang it and leave it. I had to sort of warm it up, like when you get a new pair of shoes and they hurt your feet at first. So you don't wear them for 12 hours a day, but you wear them for 2 hours a day, a sort of thing to ease your way into it. And so I did a little bit at a time to bring it in, but it was easy. It was a very easy bringing it into my space, living with this shape. Whereas this one, and you had mentioned it yourself, the first time I hung
Mm.
it in the window, I got a headache and I had to put it in a drawer wrapped in cloth because the headache was just overpowering.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
Oh no, no, it's good. It's all good. But like that's part of the difference. Like even just you look like the other one is very rounded, it's circles, it's
Yeah.
soft. This is edges and edges and edges and so many edges.
Yeah. What I was going to say about design is that this is like, when I was talking about the golden ratio and the fractal principle, that's all there is here. That's everything that's in this. And it's worth mentioning that the pentagram esoterically is associated with spirit coming into matter.
Mm.
And that's kind of how I experienced this one. So this is extremely potent and it's very pointed to your point. And it kind of takes no prisoners, right?
It's
And I find it,
uncompromising. That's a word we both
yeah,
use. It's uncompromising. Yeah.
yeah, very uncompromising. And in my case, and my relationship, to it is unique. But in my case, it's very commanding. It tells me what to do,
Yeah.
right? And mostly I like you, I learned that, it's usually better to do as you're guided, and
Yeah.
if you resist, you eventually come around, right?
So
That's kind of like,
one of the interesting things though, even though this form is so pointy, it
mm,
likes flow. It likes the water. It's
yeah,
very this is when something you had gotten an instruction to put it in, like take me to a body of water and immerse
yeah,
me in the water.
yeah,
So you've done that a few times. I've done that as
yeah,
well. And so
right,
this next image is of you took it to the water.
yeah, yeah. So this will sound pretty kooky, but I was in Canada getting ready to come to India, and I saw an image of the Bosphorus Strait, which is um, this it goes through Turkey, and it's salt water, and I felt that I had to take the star and put it in the Bosphorus Strait. And so I planned to do that on my way back from India, but life had other plans for me. And unbeknownst to me, the Indian government had canceled my visa. So I was stuck in Istanbul for 5 days scrambling to get a new visa for India. And I took the tablet down into the Bosphorus Strait. This is not the Bosphorus Strait. This is a river in India, but it's not a bad image to have on the screen while I tell this story. I took this tablet down to the Bosphorus Strait. My hotel, I was able to pick a hotel that was right close to where I knew was the right point to put the form. And um, my body, especially after I put my feet in, I found some fishing line, and I tied the fishing line onto the star because I didn't want to lose the star. I didn't know anything about this body of water, and I was on the rocks in the city of Istanbul, and I lowered the form into the water, and the whole thing was just electrifying. And I took off my shoes and put my feet in the water, and my body was just flooded with so much high frequency energy. I don't think I slept that night. And I repeated the whole exercise the next day, which was maybe a little bit too much for my nervous system. But it became evident over time that I wasn't supposed to wait 6 months to do this, that it really needed to be done at that point. And the second day, the water level, after about 15 or 20 seconds, the water level rose up about 10 inches and it didn't go down again. So I never saw that before. It's like, how does the water just come up 10 inches, like from my ankle to below my knee and stay there?
Hmm.
It's like, okay, we're not in Kansas anymore, or whatever you want
Yeah.
to say.
And
Yeah.
I've taken the form and put it in the Atlantic because of where I live. And now the water was very cold the day that I did that. And so I didn't stay in for more than 5 minutes. I stayed in for as long as my feet would let me. But the feeling for me was very, well, I guess coming together. It was peaceful in a sense, like it was energizing, but it was like, oh, I can exhale. Like energy
Hmm.
is flowing better. I'm not struggling to make energy flow in my system. And so it was very energizing, very uplifting. And I did notice it like for a few, I almost wanted to go do it right away. And you said you can, but also just beware, like you might not sleep. And
Yeah.
that I've done. And then a little while later, I really felt that the star was saying, I want to be in Shivambu. And I told you that,
Yeah.
and this is part of what resulted. And I didn't think to put a picture in it that I took, because I put mine in a silver dish, and you put
Yeah.
yours in something you found where you were that fit it beautifully.
Yeah. Yep.
And so
Yes.
we both followed this call. And yeah, how would you talk about what's happened since then in terms of the fractal energy and the way that it's worked?
Yeah. Well, it's worth mentioning that I told you this before, but I want to say it again that when you said this to me, it didn't seem to me that it was coming from your personal awareness. It seemed to me it was coming from the tablet.
Yeah.
And it was like, it wasn't like, oh, this is Megan's suggestion. It was like, oh my God, the tablet is talking to me through Megan. That was how I took it, right? That's how I read it. And
Mm.
so I got right on it. And so my first batch was fresh urine, and I left it I think it was another container that was a bit more of a tight fit. This one is deeper and worked better. But um, what I did was I have this rattan chair. I wonder if you can scroll down. Yeah. So this is an all organic material, and you can see it slats. It's very breathable. If you go down one more, Megan. So I put the star under. So I sat in this chair over the star with fresh urine, sitting in fresh urine. And it was kind of like, whoa, that's strong. And I have a lot of experience with the strength of these fields, right? From 22 years of sacred geometry practice, learning about how to create these fields and how to read them. And it was like, well, this is really serious and it's something new. And so the next time around, which was a week or two later, I decided to use the aged. And I don't have photos for that, but it's the same, kind of thing, putting it in the aged. But I just put it in the star in the aged for 2 hours. And then I hung the star overhead like this one and left the Shivambu in the container below the chair. And the very powerful toroidal field, and I don't think we have a graphic for, think of a donut and think of I like to say the energy coming up through the middle of the donut over the chocolate sprinkles down the side, and in the true toroid, it goes right up the middle again. And that was happening. And I've never had such a complete experience of a toroidal field. There's a lot of fiddling with, tables with holes drilled in them that I've done over the years. But this was like very strong and very successful. But the thing that really stands out about it is that there was a lot of me in the field. It wasn't
Mm.
just me sandwiched in a field that was a result of manipulating steel or copper, but the Shivambu was my Shivambu, and the toroid had my energy in it, so it was much more organic. In addition to being very powerful. So just to recap, the star above, like this, sitting in that chair with the tablet charged Orin underneath me, and so this was the upper node of upper part of the toroidal field, and the Shivambu was the lower part. And they were through like a kind of quantum resonance, they're very connected because the Orin was charged with the tablet's energy. So it was call and answer. And my system, of course, our bodies are huge electromagnetic fields, right? Have huge electromagnetic fields. And I don't, I'm not the best person to talk about the physics of it, but it's been really remarkable, and I've been meditating under it twice a day for a couple of months, I think. I haven't been counting the weeks exactly. But yeah, so what's really interesting about it is that it's an early effort to integrate my sacred geometry practice and my meditation practice and my Shivambu practice. And you know what? I don't know what's going on, but it's really powerful. So I'm pretty happy, that
Yeah.
it's a real synthesis. There's a real synthesis here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And so
going back to the early mention of hybridization.
yes. Okay. So
Yeah.
we've done beautifully because we're coming up to about, how long we said
Yeah.
we would. we would talk. And I love how this has come back around to really make the point of how these three practices informing each other, being potent together, this hybridization of it. And each one is distinct and powerful on its own. It's not, there's
Right.
not taking anything away from any of these practices on their own, but the discovery through listening, right? Because it was just, I got this super strong image of like, the tablet wants to be in Shivambu. And I
Yeah.
shared it. And you felt that coming from the tablet as well. Because I didn't,
Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't feel like I imagined it. It really was like popped in. And we both did it really quickly.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you picked it up. It makes sense to me that you would pick up a message like that because you're much more connected to the Shivambu energy because you've been doing it for like 10 years now, right? Something
12,
like that. 12.
I
Okay.
think. Well,
And
actually, no, we're in February now. Oh my goodness. I started in 20, yeah, I started in 2013. So it's 12. Yeah.
yeah. So, you know, so it's very interesting that message came through you
Mm,
and um and because I'm so connected to the sacred geometry, it was like there was no delay, there was no filtering. It was like, okay, must do this, right? So it's just kind of interesting. It kind of confirms the nature of the stuff we're talking about to do with sending and receiving.
yeah.
That we are actually becoming interdimensional transceivers, transmitters and receivers, right? And not everybody is living that way, to state the obvious, but I think that we're all moving in that direction. And I think that's where the species is going. We're talking about something very profound, right? This millennial transformation. We're talking about an evolutionary leap, I believe, of our entire species.
Mm,
And, and the stuff that we're like, um, you know, um, zealously trying to problem solve and experiment with, um, risking the ridicule of our friends and neighbors, um, it's just we're scouts, right? We're just out front, and it'll just all this stuff is just going to happen organically for people at some point as the planetary frequency, the Schumann resonance, et cetera, continues to go up, and so I believe, so I think,
yeah.
yeah,
So it's a beautiful, with that sense of like humanity rising, everything coming up. For me, as well, bringing all this together makes sense. For years, I heard humanity will become more crystalline. Our bodies will become more crystalline. And I'm like, how does that happen? It didn't, I was willing to like trust the people who were saying it, but it didn't make sense to me. And this experience over the last number of years, bringing in then what Fiona's bringing, I'm like, oh, that's what we're talking about. Now I get it in terms of how the crystalline forms are actually visible in our
right.
liquids.
Have we shown any of those slides yet?
No, I
Yeah.
think, I mean, I can, what I would say to people is I have two discussions that I've put up on my YouTube channel with Fiona
Yeah.
Gardner. She
Okay.
also has other discussions with other people. And
Mhm.
I would love to come back to this. And I think Peter's up for it. We will have a conversation, first of all, with Fiona,
Yeah.
sacred geometry, urine, the whole thing, but also Peter and I would go into another discussion where we'll go more deeply into some of the things that we touched on today, in terms of how those things are actually functioning and working. But this was a good introductory video for people.
Great. Yeah.
Also, if they just want to see, you mentioned one of Fiona's videos on her Instagram channel, Messages with Urine. She has some of those videos, so you can watch a quick 30-second, 1 minute sort of a video of the crystalline forms like actually moving in the urine.
Yeah.
But it's now, just to say, like, for me, it's been a beautiful journey through coming to understand what does that mean when we say we're becoming more crystalline. And it is about being
Yeah.
able to hold this higher frequency, have more coherence. And that's part of how the body actually is able to expand into a different way of being.
Right. For me, those video clips that Fiona managed to take were revelatory. And I had just started using this matrix I just described. And I felt that I could feel in my body what her video clips were showing, which was these forms just projecting. I think you used the term out of the void. That's what it seemed like. And they were luminous. They just appeared. They're fractals just projecting this golden light. And I thought, oh my God, that's what's happening in my body. It was like my body was saying, yes, pay attention. It was very visceral. And so I want to say I'm really grateful for the work that Fiona is doing and for your bringing it forward. And I just feel there's a lot of correspondence here, meaningful correspondence between these different things we're working on. It's very
Yeah.
exciting.
It
Yeah.
is. It is very exciting. So, to everyone who's joining us, we hope that you're also excited by these ideas and what's going on. And if you haven't checked out those other discussions yet, please go look at those. They will give you even more energy to be excited about the possibilities. If you do have questions, please get in touch. You can, under this video, or all of my contact information is there. How to look at Peter's forms will also be in the show notes. And thank you for joining us again. And thank you, Peter, for being here with me. I really appreciate it. Till next
Thanks,
time.
Megan. It was, yeah, great chat. Thank you.